The girl named Wendy works as a ranger at a mountain reserve. Right now she's catastrophically late for the briefing. Colder temperatures are expected, so the number of casualties is likely to increase. Additionally, cougars and bears have been appearing more frequently on the northwest trails. The animals are descending from the mountains in search of food. Wendy was reprimanded for being late again. Currently, all park rangers must follow their designated routes. Safety is a priority for them. Although shift exchanges are prohibited, Wendy agreed to swap routes with her friend Maya, who wanted to work with Chip, the guy of her dreams. It wasn't difficult for Wendy to monitor the route instead of Maya. Craig reminded Wendy that she's specialized in children's routes, but it didn't deter her because she underwent the same training as everyone else. Wendy is confident that nothing could go wrong. After gathering all the necessary items, reviewing the route and listening to music on her headphones, she set off, putting up flyers on trees warning tourists of potential dangers. For Wendy, it was just a pleasant walk in the forest. She didn't expect to encounter her colleague Davey here. As it turned out, their routes intersected. They chatted for a few minutes, and Wendy was about to continue her route. Davey offered to keep her company, but she politely declined. Soon Wendy got lost. At that moment, she regretted skipping the briefings so often. Taking out a map from her backpack, Wendy tried to orient herself. Suddenly she was startled by rustling in the trees. It might have just been the wind. It seemed Wendy managed to figure out roughly where she was. The rustling occurred again. Wendy decided to climb higher. And once again there was rustling, causing Wendy to lose her balance and fall. A fawn ran past her. In the general chat, Wendy saw a message from Maya, joking that Wendy was probably lost by now. Of course, Wendy replied that everything was fine. On the tree, she saw huge claw marks that looked like bear claws. Wendy was in such a hurry that she forgot her map here. The path up the mountain was challenging, but Wendy bravely continued to climb forward. Soon Wendy stopped to catch her breath and have a snack. All the anxieties released her. Taking a selfie, Wendy stood on the edge of the cliff. When she shared the photo in the group chat, Maya asked with a message where the view was from. Wendy replied that it was from Brighton Rock, but it turned out that wasn't the place. Concerned, Wendy turned on her navigator, but due to poor signal the device couldn't determine her location. Trying to keep calm, Wendy searched her backpack for the map, but it wasn't there. Maya advised her to return the same way, as it would soon get dark. Fortunately, Wendy had a flashlight with her. The girl tried to calm herself down. Suddenly Maya sent a message asking Wendy who was in the photo behind her. Turning around and looking down, Wendy saw a man's body at the foot of the cliff. At that moment Wendy's cell phone, as luck would have it, went dead. She didn't want to believe this was happening to her. Wendy had no choice but to descend. There was still hope that the man was alive, just unconscious. But as Wendy approached closer, she realized he had been lifeless for a long time. In panic, Wendy took out her radio from her backpack and climbed higher again, where she could catch a signal. Wendy contacted the base and reported the horrifying discovery in the forest. According to Wendy's estimation, the man had fallen from the cliff approximately 2 days ago and perished. Wendy broke the rule by agreeing to swap routes with Maya, but that didn't matter now. The dispatcher instructed her. According to the rules, Wendy should secure the area and stay in place until rescuers arrive. As it would soon get dark and wandering in the forest at night was risky, the rescuers would only set out in the morning. Wendy didn't intend to stay here all night with the lifeless man and wanted to return to the base before dark, but she had no idea where exactly she was. The radio suddenly broke, and Wendy burst into tears in helplessness. It seems she has no choice but to wait for help. According to the instructions, Wendy secured the area. To avoid falling into complete panic, she talked to herself. About a mile from the body discovery site was a tent. Wendy entered it and inspected the items, finding a folding knife, batteries, and some other useful things. Suddenly she saw a fleeting shadow. There was crackling outside. Holding her breath, Wendy exited the tent and looked around. The crackling was probably caused by a rope tied to a branch of a large tree. Hanging from the branch was a bag from which red liquid was dripping. Overwhelmed by the unbearable stench, Wendy felt nauseous and hurried away. Returning to the same spot, Wendy noticed movement near the body. It turned out to be a rat. Frightened, Wendy tried to reassure herself that she would get out of here at dawn. The main thing was to survive this night. Barely calming down, Wendy suddenly heard the sound of rocks rolling. Wendy went to check it out. On one of the trees, she saw traces of huge claws. There was a cave up ahead. Wendy approached, asking if anyone was there. At that moment the radio turned on. At the top of the cliff, Wendy tried to contact the base again, but the signal was weak and the battery was running out. Wendy replaced the batteries in the radio and finally managed to reach her colleagues. Learning that Wendy had entered the tent, the dispatcher said she shouldn't have done that. It might be a crime scene, although everything looked like an accident. Suddenly Wendy saw a man near the body and immediately reported it to the dispatcher, who ordered her to do her job and chase away the uninvited guest. When the man noticed her too, Wendy bent over sharply and dropped the radio from her hand. The uninvited guest disappeared. Wendy had to descend from the cliff to pick up the radio, which of course broke upon falling. Wendy was very scared when the man sneaked up behind her. The man assured her that he often walks in this forest. Wendy in turn stated that the police were already on their way. Despite Wendy's persistent requests to leave the potential crime scene, the man examined the body and concluded that it indeed didn't look like a fall. The poor guy didn't have his passport or driver's license with him, but he had a mobile phone, which naturally was dead. Wendy didn't like that this man was leaving fingerprints everywhere. When Wendy saw a knife with the uninvited guest, she more insistently asked him to leave the scene. He said he just wanted to help. The forest is full of wild animals, and it's not safe for a fragile girl to be here alone at night. Wendy reassured him that she would manage. When the uninvited guest left, Wendy returned the phone to its place. As dusk approached, it started to get colder, and Wendy put on her jacket. The wait felt like an eternity. It was very difficult for Wendy to be near the lifeless person in complete darkness. To make it less frightening, Wendy turned on her flashlight and the one she had found earlier. Suddenly the flashlight fell by itself and rolled towards the body. Wendy didn't want to get so close, but she had to. Wendy decided to go to the tent. There were cracking twigs and sounds made by wild animals everywhere. At any moment a predator could appear, but Wendy had no way to protect herself. Suddenly she noticed an open box on the grass near the tent. It looked like someone had been here. Trying not to panic, Wendy took a blanket from the tent and went back. Every sound made her flinch. Was there someone else here? At first Wendy just quickened her pace, but then she started running. Returning to the same spot, Wendy gathered dry twigs and lit a fire. It made her feel safer, but when she looked at the lifeless man again, she felt fear once more. Wendy decided to cover him with a handkerchief. The vast starry sky was an unnecessary reminder of how lonely people are beneath it. Wendy managed to fall asleep. The campfire began to die out. Suddenly the lifeless man moved and made eerie sounds like wheezing. The handkerchief slid off the man's face, his eyes opened. Waking up and seeing the body come to life, Wendy screamed in horror and ran into the woods, unable to see where she was going. The zombie was chasing her. Hiding behind a tree, Wendy froze and tried not to even breathe. The zombie was getting closer. Because of the wind and the creaking of branches, Wendy couldn't hear its footsteps. Turning around, she came face to face with the zombie. It was just a nightmare. However, approaching the lifeless man, Wendy discovered that the handkerchief had been blown away by the wind. Wendy covered the man again to avoid seeing his face. Now Wendy was definitely not in the mood for sleep. Suddenly she heard the voice of the dispatcher and colleagues coming from the radio, saying that as a pathetic specialist in children's roots, she couldn't handle this. Of course they were hallucinations caused by stress. In a fit of rage, Wendy threw away the broken radio. She seemed to have calmed down, but a horrifying sound from the forest made her scream. Wendy hastily took out bear repellent from her backpack. As Wendy stared into the dark forest, the lifeless man stood up and sneaked up behind her. Wendy sprayed the repellent in his face. The zombie disappeared, or perhaps it was just a hallucination, but the spray got into Wendy's eyes. Feeling unbearable burning, she rinsed her face with water from the bottle. Of course the body was still in the same place. Wendy was deeply frightened, so her imagination painted various horrifying images. Wendy decided to face her fear literally and removed the handkerchief, telling the lifeless man that she wasn't afraid of him. "It's just a body." It was dawn. Wendy can't believe she survived this night, which was the scariest of her life. When Wendy was climbing the cliff, she slipped and fell, losing consciousness. For some time, she remained unconscious, seeing the disturbing image of the forest. Upon regaining consciousness, Wendy, despite the pain, was able to continue climbing to the top. Suddenly she saw the same man again, whom she had seen here yesterday. He disappeared a second later. This added to Wendy's determination. At one point the man grabbed her, shouting for her to stop. Panicked, Wendy pushed him away and the man fell from the cliff. Wendy looked down but saw no one. When will the rescuers arrive? Wendy felt weak. Her head hurt after the fall. She had no strength to go on. A crackling noise brought Wendy back to her senses. A huge bear was approaching her. Before Wendy could escape, the predator attacked. Wendy managed to get out bear repellent and use it. The lighter intensified the effect, and the bear retreated. At that moment a shot rang out. The rescue team was here. Wendy couldn't believe she was saved. The forest seemed so peaceful now. Maya was amazed by her friend's bravery. It turned out that the rescuers had set out not in the morning but at night, to avoid wasting precious time, so they arrived so early. The expert concluded that the man perished not from the fall, but from the claws of a bear. Wendy was deeply shocked when she realized that the man she had pushed off the cliff earlier was the same one she had originally found lifeless. Fingerprints confirmed this. It turns out Wendy was talking to a ghost, although it's clear that it was just hallucinations. In the final scene, we see Wendy hysterically laughing.